69 years ago today, men from all over the United States and other Allied countries took part in Operation Overlord, otherwise known as the D-Day invasion. It was Harry Crouch's 20th birthday as he and James Walters and the other men of the 29th Infantry Division stormed Omaha Beach, hoping to secure a foothold on France's west coast. Robert Wilson served with the U.S. Navy aboard the USS Quincy, providing covering fire for men attacking Utah Beach. Fred Adams was a signalman with the U.S. Navy, helping to coordinate the attack, while Donald Wells, who was serving with the U.S. Navy aboard the USS Barnett, delivering men such as Roger Nabergall, who were released from their landing crafts and attempted to survive the defenses of Hitler's Atlantic Wall. The night before, radio operator Michael Ingrasano was on a C-47 that delivered paratroopers such as Donald Grawl onto the French coast, where they would secure major roadways to prepare for the massive invasion about to take place. These men were joining those who had been fighting the Axis powers for years. In 1941, at Pearl Harbor, John Dyer, Thomas Miller, Stephen Krawczak, Betty Moore, and Thomas Griffin had witnessed the beginning of America's involvement in the war when the Japanese led a surprise attack against our naval base and airfields in Hawaii. As the war spread across the Pacific, millions of young men were plucked from their everyday lives to be trained and sent into battle. Edward Connor was serving with the 3rd Bomb Squadron of the U.S. Army Air Corps, based out of Papua New Guinea, while 13-year-old Robert Pettit and 14-year-old Daniel Chris both managed to get past recruitment officers to enlist underage and were assigned to the Pacific Fleet by the Navy. Both Roy Cooley and William Hanusek were serving as medics, helping to save men's lives in the Pacific. Meanwhile, Marine Earl Anderson was aboard the USS Yorktown at the Battle of the Coral Sea, and later when it sunk at the Battle of the Midway.
In Europe, Walter Mess was working for the OSS by parachuting into Czechoslovakia and Poland to help build a resistance movement to a German occupation that was sure to come. Citizens such as Madeline Rich in France and Nina Hamner in Denmark were actively working with the resistance to protect their country's Jewish populations. Meanwhile, Laszlo Berkowitz was en route to Auschwitz in Poland, while Mark Strauss was a young Jewish boy trying to hide from German capture.
Stateside, the entire country was united in both spirit and concern as their family members and friends were off at war and sometimes not heard from in months. After the successful invasion of Normandy, it would take another full year before the Nazis could be defeated. Early victories were later put at risk by the Battle of the Bulge. Finally, in May of 1945, the Germans surrendered and the war was over in Europe. Across the continent, celebrations broke out for victory in Europe. For Americans, that celebration was short-lived as we turned our eyes to Asia and the lingering war with Japan. Despite being surrounded and blockaded by the United States Armed Forces, the Japanese continued to fight on until the United States' use of the atomic bombs finally convinced them to surrender.
Almost 70 years from the conclusion of that war, we gather here at Rocky Run Middle School in Chantilly, Virginia, to not only recognize and remember the sacrifices made by these men and women, but also to thank them for their service to our country. Rocky Run's The Latest Generation Meets the Greatest Generation program has been in existence for the past 12 years, recently opening its doors to those who served in Korea, Vietnam, Afghanistan, and Iraq, as well as witnesses from other historic events. During these 12 years, we have conducted over 1,000 small group interviews. Through these interviews, approximately 4,000 students have been inspired and impacted by your stories. Stories which these young men and women have since passed on to their friends and families. Stories of survival, compassion, and the greatest of human spirit. These same students, who for so many years have been listening to you speak here in the halls of Rocky Run, came back to our school to express to you, our veterans and eyewitnesses of Oral History Day, how much this program has impacted them and how they have kept your stories close to their hearts through all these years.
incredible walking next to this guy who was really like, you know, genuinely a hero.
I just remember like the morning of, like we're sitting in the cafeteria, we're all waiting for our veterans to come, and we're like, oh my gosh, what is he gonna look like? Who's it gonna be? You know, it was really cool.
It's so rare for us to get this giant gathering of all these veterans who are in all these different experiences, and it's just kind of mind-blowing to hear all their stories.
I remember preparing for World War II Day by looking at the background information on our veterans who we were going to be interviewing. We kind of read a general overview of where they served, what front of the war they were fighting on, and so that way we could better formulate questions to ask them.
As much preparation as we did, at the end of the day, like, we were all a little nervous because we didn't really know what to expect, and what, like, this was a group of people that were obviously really important to our history.
The greatest
generation, yeah, but we just didn't know. So it was just kind of, we prepared, but at the same time we were just really along for the ride.
I was nervous before I came. I wasn't really quite sure what I was going to get, who I was going to get to talk to, but after a while I stopped being nervous because the experiences were it was just such a good experience. Everyone made me feel good, even if their stories were not that happy. They always had a warmth to them.
On TV, you kind of just get more of the facts and details, but they kind of gave me more of the story and emotional point of view of it, so that was really unique.
The only member of my family that was actually physically involved in the war was my father, who had commanded Missouri when they signed the surrender order.
You really just kind of get a feel for what the war was actually like instead of the romanticized picture or the textbook version that we are so often presented with.
In the average American textbook, you hear about isolationism, Pearl Harbor, D-Day, and the dropping of the bombs on Japan. That's most of what you hear about. When you interview somebody who was in a lesser-known part of the war, in my case, Mr. DeButz, who was in the South Pacific, and in Coleman's case, the Tuskegee Airmen, you get a new side of the war that you did not get to see, and it really helps you to understand it better. But it still leaves you with more questions, even though it leaves you with more understanding. So I would say that I did have a greater interest in World War II after the day.
World War II Day, that hands-on experience, has always encouraged me to go look at things a step further.
We're dealing with the greatest generation, which is also a fading generation. The latest generation gets to get these stories over 50 years later. That's remarkable. It is something that later generations will look back and wish that they had been able to experience that.
They really understand the importance of passing down these lessons and being with us, and it really means a lot to all of the students, and it has been a very memorable event the students carry with them for a lifetime.
You just really listen, because they have a lot to say. Pay attention because it means so much to them, but you're so lucky to have that opportunity, like Hannah said, and you're one of the last groups that will have that opportunity.
Hopefully our generation will learn to preserve the great memories and experiences of the greatest generation.
Part of history, because it's my duty now to pass these stories on and to pass on the memories and all the amazing emotion rather than just reading it off of a textbook like so many other students do.
Stories all the time. The stories that I still remember, most of the stories I heard in 7th grade, and knowing that you're one of those people that can retell those stories, so you can carry on that memory, it's really powerful.
Because not everyone's going to be around forever, and it's almost your last chance to get to learn firsthand of the stories that happened during World War II.
But learning from the people is so much more, not only interesting, but like George said, it's so much more meaningful. Like, just
heard these really big stories about these famous people who did all these huge things, but really, to put it in perspective, it's all these little things that are so important, and all these little stories we hear, and it feels like when I've heard all of these stories, like I have a part of World War II that I can give to someone.
we had to write a little summary about each person we met. Miss Schiff's summary took up most of the board because we had so much to say. It was so incredibly detailed, and we told our 5th grade class. She shared this with us so that you could share it with other people.
I remember Mr. Irons was the man that I guided around, and so one of the things I would ask him about is he had really amazing drawings that he brought, and of him parachuting out of an airplane and things like that, and I'd love to see those again because I distinctly remember those were really good drawings that he made himself actually.
Everybody on the civilian panel can tell you exactly where they were when they heard that Pearl Harbor happened.
The most interesting thing I learned from World War II Day that even in the atrocities of the concentration camps, there were still children that were born there who are still alive today, and I thought that was really interesting how people still managed to keep hope and have children and things like that even in such a horrible state of being.
Those people are unbelievable. I mean, in this generation, I wouldn't think about going to war and risking my life, but you got to give it to them. They put their lives on the line to have us safe back in the U.S., and it's pretty awesome.
Gives kids like us something to aspire to. Like, I wish I want to be brave like this veteran or this civilian. It's just inspiring. You inspire us a lot.
I don't think I'd have the bravery and the courage to do what half of them did. To even the little things, the things that seem so insignificant, I can't even imagine it.
I mean, I go to the grocery store and there's as much sugar as I want. I don't have to care about the length of my skirts because, you know, fabric isn't rationed. I can't imagine.
I can't imagine life without chocolate.
Thing to think that, you know, not many people, you know, in my personal opinion, will ever achieve what some of those people had in just a few years of their lives and sacrifice what they did.
And it really brought things to light and made me realize never to take life for granted.
You just get an understanding for what it felt like, and it's humbling because you know that hopefully you will never experience that, and just the fact that they were able to do this for the security of our future, it makes you elated and sad at the same time.
He learned how interested we are and what we're learning in school and how it related to what he did. I think it made him feel really special and made him realize that we do care about what they did for us.
Before World War II Day, I was living in a veiled world. I didn't know that people could be this cruel to each other. It was just disturbing. However, it made me realize that each one of these ordinary people had a story filled with much more hardship and struggle that I will ever go through.
I just like to thank them. I think what they're doing is more important than anything because just connecting the past to the future allows us to make the future a lot better.
Just expanding this program, it kind of reminds us that history isn't a thing that's happened. It's something that is happening, and that we can all be a part of it all the time. And it's not something that you have to, you know, go out and fight a war, but you can see something, and that is so important, to see something and to understand what is happening.
Our World War II Day program is simply the best learning experience that Rocky Run offers.
It's something to see the world through someone else's eyes.